Hey guys, what's up? My name's Jason and this is part 5 of a series of videos I've been doing where I talk about different retail locations and where you can get Overland gear. So let's go ahead and talk about Overland gear that you can get on Amazon.
Hell yes.
Rooftop tents themselves aren't necessarily a budget Overland item, but there are certain tents that you can look for if you must have a rooftop tent. I really love my Smittybilt brand products. They make really great budget camping and off-road products, and I have a ton of stuff from them, and everything I've gotten from them has been great. One thing that I don't have that a lot of people around me have recommended is their rooftop tents. A lot of people I know have the Smittybilt Overlander tent or the Smittybilt Overlander XL. When you compare these tents at $1,000 to other rooftop tent brands, these come in around half the price of some of the big brands. If you want a soft shell rooftop tent, these Smittybilt tents are a really great way to go. Now if you feel like you absolutely have to have a rooftop tent, and on top of that you absolutely need a hard shell, then you could look at something like this Trust-Made tent. I talked about this tent in my Tractor Supply video, and a few of you mentioned that you had them and you really liked them. It's very similar to the early roof nest tents that cost a lot more. They may not be nearly as cheap as a ground tent, but compared to other rooftop tents, these are pretty cheap. The Gazelle tent is a pretty great comparison to a rooftop tent, but it's a ground tent. People seem to really like them. They are very durable and super quick to set up, just like a rooftop tent. They aren't crazy cheap, but people like the Frasers and Overland Bound seem to really like them and prefer them over a rooftop tent. They set up just as fast as a rooftop tent, around 90 seconds. So if you're on a budget but still want that same speed and let's say the same clout as a rooftop tent, go for this one. Now this one might be a bit of a stretch to put on a budget list of ground tents, but it's certainly cheaper than a rooftop tent and very, very comparable. However, if you truly want a cheap ground tent, then you can look at something like this Coleman Sundome tent. This can be purchased in a number of different sizes and colors. I have one of these from way back and I really like it. The only reason I ever upgraded was because I wanted a rooftop tent. So if you want something that's lightweight or just want something really cheap and strong, you can go with one of these Hammocks. Now if you've been following along with my channel, you'll know that I mention a lot that I switched to hammock camping a few years ago, and I still have the same hammock from about 12 years ago. I switched to hammock camping back then because I just prefer to pack lighter and I preferred sleeping in the hammock. There are tons of brands out there, but the Eno brand has been really great for me, lasting 12 years or more and only needing to be patched once because a dog bit it. They have both the single nest and a double nest. I've had both, but I prefer the double nest personally just because you just have a little bit more space. And it's really only $10 more. I currently have an awning on my vehicle from Amazon that I somewhat recommend. The reason I say somewhat is because there are tons of high reviews on this awning online, so my slightly negative experience with this awning might just be user error or the fact that I bought it secondhand. So people really seem to like this one. I just had a slightly negative experience, which I do attribute to possibly buying it secondhand. There is also a much higher rated one that I've heard great things about, and that is the Danchel Outdoor, which is only $10 more than the other one. Awnings aren't really something from my experience that I would cheap out on, just because, you know, from experience and the people around me, if you go cheap, sometimes it doesn't work out. My actual recommendation would be to actually not even go on Amazon for this, just save up and go with something like the Rome awning. This one here is on Spirit of 1876. Or if you really need something, you know, nice that's going to last you a long time and you just kind of throw the budget out the window, this is really great. This is actually my favorite one that I've ever seen. This is the 23-0 Peregrine 180. But from my experience, you don't really need an awning, but if you feel like you do need it, then just save up and go something a little bit nicer. When it comes to budget sleeping bags, I feel like the route to go is to stick with the Coleman staples. That's at least the case for summer and slightly cool weather ones anyway. The first one I would recommend is this Coleman Palmetto bag. This is really great for summer. It's rated down to 30 degrees, which is the absolute coldest that you should take it. The rating on the sleeping bags is actually showing you the survivability, not the comfort. So if the bag is rated for 30 degrees and it's 32 degrees out, you'll still be pretty damn cold. The next bag is a little on the higher side for sleeping bag, but it's an all-weather bag, so you get quite a few sleeping bags in one. For $100, you can have a sleeping bag that'll take you from 60 degrees all the way down to 0 degrees. Now this last one I really like and highly recommend for the winter campers out there. I'm a huge fan of cold weather camping because pretty much everyone's off the trails and there are tons of campsites still available. This one is my go-to bag and it's good all the way down to negative 30 degrees. That's negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. I found that if you unzip the sides and don't use the cinching part, then you can actually camp in much warmer temps with this as well. So it's very versatile. I really like this one because it's a really cold weather sleeping bag for about a third of the price of some mid-level ones and almost an eighth of a price of some high-end stuff. However, if you don't have a lot of space, I would look elsewhere because this thing is comically large when rolled up. So while we're on the subject of winter camping, another thing you can do to keep yourself warm is to add a down blanket on the inside of your bag. I like this Get Out Gear one that packs down really small and can be really helpful in cold weather, but also in the case of warm weather, you could probably even use this in place of a sleeping bag. So while you're at it, I would actually recommend getting an emergency blanket if you're going to be doing really any sort of camping. Especially where I live, the weather can change very quickly, and even in the summer, the temperatures can drop to levels that can really affect your body temperature. These are a really great option for using as an emergency to keep yourself warm. Now, if you're a rooftop tent sleeper, I wouldn't necessarily consider this an absolute necessity, but something to make sleep a little bit nicer. Now, if you're a ground tent sleeper, I might actually call this one a necessity. I have a mattress pad that I love and I've used for a really long time. It's from REI, but some of the highest rated ones are actually on Amazon. The best one I've seen on Amazon is the X-Ped, but we're not really going to talk about that one today. The highest rated one in the budget category is the Climate Static V sleeping bag. This one is only $67 and it is a whopping 2.5 inches thick. This would be the best bet for a budget conscious camper, and it also comes in 4 different colors. So along with this, if you wanted, you can add the Climate V sheet to the pad and it's only an extra $30. So a little tip, when you're looking at sleeping pads, look for the higher R value ones. If you can, they will hold a lot more heat and keep the heat from going into the ground. Additionally, I would also recommend getting at least a 1.7 inch or thicker, as anything less will really only provide very minimal help. I'm also going to throw in this camping pillow here because I didn't really know where else to put it. This is basically the same one that I have, and it packs down the same way that mine does, and it's also climate as well. I personally got mine before I started overlanding, but now that I'm more into the car camping world, I usually just bring a regular pillow. My absolute favorite table is this King Camp folding table, but you're looking at $100 for this table. If you have the money and the space, the double-sized ones are well worth it. Since I recently switched from the single to the double, I've been really happy, but maybe because I do a lot of filming and it just works best for me. So for this video, let's just go ahead and focus on single-sized tables like the Coleman. This one I highly recommend as it was my primary camping table before I got my new one. It packs down small and can hold a good amount of weight. It's also very similar to the REI table that a lot of people have, and that REI table is $75, so this table coming in at only $40 is well worth the money. It's also one of the highest rated items I've really ever seen on Amazon, with a 4.8 user rating and tons of people rating it. When it comes to camping chairs, I'm not really a super picky guy. I usually just use a cheap chair, and while I know that there are good ones out there and I've sat in tons of them, I really like them. It just hasn't been a huge priority for me. My favorite cheap one is this $24 Coleman camping chair that's very basic. The biggest downside for me is the fact that you can't fit a hydro flask or canteen in your cup holder. This next one is very similar to my Walmart hammock chair that I really like. These are super comfortable because even on not so flat ground, you'll still be comfortable. This one is a little more expensive, but if you want something a bit more comfortable, then this is a really good option. Those of y'all that know me know I love my Blackstone products. If you have the space, this mini Blackstone is well worth it. I have the full-size one for the house and I really liked it, so I had to get the mini version for camping. For some reason, they only have the 22-inch on Amazon now. Don't mind going with another brand. You can look at something like this Royal Gourmet one that's $114. I mentioned a similar one in my Tractor Supply video. This one doesn't have the weird knobs poking out of the side, which I mentioned as a detractor from the other one. For a really good budget stove that's a little more traditional, you can check out this Coleman Triton at $80. This is a great stove and really is just a much upgraded version of my old stove, which was my dad's stove when he was young. The old hand pump gas grill that Coleman makes, and I really liked it other than the fact that it was old and it rattled a lot. I may eventually end up getting the updated version because I've heard nothing but good things about it. So for a really budget conscious option, look at the Gas One butane stove for only $33. I had one like this from Walmart, and while it was very slow to cook things, it eventually did get the job done. My recommendation would be to go for the Coleman, but if you are on a really tight budget, I believe this Gas One would be just fine. So y'all already know that I'm going to recommend the Set Power fridge. Big brands like the ARB fridges start at around $800, but for about half the price you can get into one of these fridges that are actually really great. I have both the RV45D and the RV45S, and I recommend either of these for anyone who's looking. The RV45D is going to be a dual zone fridge that is actually my current for my fridge in my vehicle. The RV45S is the single zone, and it is great for those who don't need a freezer and just want a cheap fridge that works. I actually have 2 videos on these fridges if you want to learn more, and I highly recommend them. If you're just looking for a cooler, there are also some really great options out there. I really recommend that if you get a cooler, you go for something that either zips or latches closed. The last thing you want is for your food or drinks to fly out while getting to your camp. If you just want a soft cooler, you can go with one of these LifeWick coolers that comes very highly rated online. This isn't going to keep ice cool for days and days, but if you're going to go out for a day or two and don't open it a ton, then you should be perfectly fine. This Arctic Zone Titan is a big step up from the last one, but it's still not as good as a roto cooler or a fridge. If you want something that'll keep ice for a few days but don't want to spend Yeti money, a great cooler would be this Igloo blow molded cooler. This is about as close to a Yeti you can get on a budget, and it comes very highly rated. I really love camp lights, and I've tried out tons of them over the years. My favorite ones to date are these Cascade Mountain Tech lights. These things have different modes, which I found very useful, and the construction is really great on them. Plus, the biggest one for these lights is that you get 3 lights for $18 or so. They are 500 lumens, and they really don't eat up too much battery compared to some other lanterns that I've used. They also have these new ones for even cheaper, but you only get 2 of them. A big one that people are always asking about in my videos are these Coleman panel lights I have. They have 2, 3, and 4 panel ones at various different price points. I have the 3 panel, which comes in at only $50, but if you have the budget for it, you can get the larger 4 panel one for about $30 more. These are really great lights, and the panels are magnetic, so you can take them with you and stick them to your vehicle if you need to see something and you need your hands to be free. The biggest downside for me is that they do sort of eat a little bit of battery, and they run off of D batteries, so they do eat up quite a bit of power. There's also the old staple of the Lucy Light inflatable lights. These things are really great and packed down really small. I'm sure you've seen them before if you've been camping in a group. Almost always someone at camp has one. They can run off of solar, and they're great to just stick up near the windshield and charge while you're driving to your destination. The last camping specific one I want to mention is a new one for me, but it stays in my drawers at all times. This is a set of Lucy string lights. For $33, you can have a nice ambient light at your site, and realistically, it's probably bright enough for pretty much everything you need to see around your tent. I've had other string lights before in the past, like those copper wire ones, but the second time I used my last ones, they broke, and they just feel really chintzy and really cheap, so I've never really been a big fan of those. These are really strong weather-resistant lights that can be used for camping or even for home use. As a sort of bonus, I do want to mention this EDC light that I have. I usually keep this thing on me at all times when I'm sitting up front on my Desert Does It panel. This thing would usually be more of an EDC light, but I constantly keep it on my hip or my pocket while camping. It is a good quality brand, but it's one of their cheapest lights that they make. It's about 180 lumens, which isn't spectacular, but it's certainly brighter than a phone light, and it's also very small. I also carry this Olight small one on my keys as well. I wanted to throw headlamps into a separate category because there's a lot out there. I really love them at camp because a lot of the time I'm doing stuff at night that requires both my hands, so having a headlamp is really just a no-brainer. The first one I want to mention is this new one that I just picked up. It is motion activated. This is really great if I have heavy gloves on or if I'm digging or something where I don't want to keep touching the headlamp button. It comes in two sizes. One is the 350 lumen and the other is a 600 lumen from a different brand. These things take up almost no space and are completely rechargeable. If you want something a little more traditional, you can go for something like this Petzl 250 lumen headlamp, or you can also go for this Black Diamond 350. There are tons out there that are cheaper, but in my experience, the super cheap ones have not always been the best. I personally had the Petzl and I've loved mine for years. If you want something really cheap, but not still complete trash, I would go with this 260 watt Energizer headlamp. This is only $15. First thing I want to put in this category is sporks. I really love these little spoon, fork, knife combos. The brand is either Yuko or Ucko. They're super cheap and they are really strong. So it's a spoon, fork, knife. There's really not much else to say other than they are utilitarian and pretty cheap. When it comes to camp cooking on a budget, I would go for kits to knock out pretty much all the stuff you need. One company that I really like in this regard is Stanley. They have two sets that I recommend. The first is this all-in-one 2-bowl set that comes with 2 bowls, a pot, a spatula, and a ladle. Pretty much most of the stuff you would need to cook at camp. I normally like cast iron while camping because it's just better, but if you want cheap and transportable, this is a really great way to do it. The next one is another Stanley product, the Camp Cook set with cups. This one is really great for boiling water, making coffee, cooking soup, and really a number of different applications. I have this one as well, and it's really great. Almost every time I camp, these are my go-to cups. Now for me personally, I would recommend just grabbing yourself a cast iron pan to cook with because it has so many applications. I really like Lodge, and I have skillets from them that I've used since college, and not once have I had an issue. I really like cast iron for camping because worst case scenario, you can just toss it in the fire to cook on, which I often do. So in theory, if you're having a campfire, you don't even really need a stove if you have one of these cast iron pans. There are a few tools out there that I would actually consider must-haves for camping, the first of which is an axe. I 100% back the Fiskars products, and I've been really happy with all of mine from them so far. I currently have a Fiskars axe that sits on my vehicle at all times. That being said, my first one got stolen, so it's probably best to keep that inside. So if you don't have the room inside, you can also go for a hatchet. I have one mounted inside now that is just some random hatchet from Ace, but the Fiskars hatchet is really the next move. Another tool I would recommend would be a shovel. If you want something small and compact, you can go for this SOG military shovel. This isn't the exact one that I have. Mine's actually a lower quality brand, but I know that SOG makes really high quality stuff, so I have no problem bringing this one up. Another must-have tool in my mind would be a folding saw. You can go out and spend a bunch of money on a high-priced but high quality Silky brand if you'd like, but for the budget-minded person, I'd recommend this Corona 10-inch folding saw. I've been very happy with mine, and it was much cheaper than the Silky saw. It does have its downsides though. The biggest one for me is that when the saw is closed, the teeth are still a little bit exposed, which could be an issue, but for me it hasn't really been an issue. I just note that it's there and don't put my fingers in between it. The next one is going to be more so a recommendation for EDC gear, and that's going to be a good pocket knife. When it comes to budget pocket knives, I really like Kershaw. Kershaw offers knives in a ton of different price ranges, and even their low-end stuff isn't that bad. My personal EDC knife is this Kershaw bracket cleaver style knife. I was really drawn to this knife because of its weight, shape, and price. Just note that it is assisted opening mechanism, so if you don't like that, then you can look at something else. They also have the Kershaw Clash, which is a great entry-level knife and is really going to be an all-around pretty solid knife for under $40. So those of you guys that like winter camping know the struggle to stay warm is very real. I've tried a number of different heaters over the years, and I've really narrowed it down to my favorite top 3. The first of which is a diesel heater. This one is new for me, but has really taken over as my go-to heater for camping. I really like these because there are a ton of different ways that you can set these up. You can go the DIY route and build your own enclosure. This one's a little bit more loose and it's made for, going inside of RVs or something like that, but you can build your own enclosure. You can also go with one of these like I have, which fits really great on this tire table. Now I will have a video on how I set this up because it does not come from the factory like this. I had to do a little bit of DIY. The last one you can go with is one of these wider ones that kind of gives you a little bit more of a sturdy base, but it won't fit on the tire thing as I had it set up. The best thing about diesel heaters is that they barely use any fuel and the heat you get out of them is a lot drier. This is what I have mostly switched to, and I'll have a video on how I set mine up coming very soon. The next one is the Buddy heater. These are super common and still really great way to heat your tent. The big downside for me is that the heat that comes out of these is a much wetter heat, and it leads to a lot more condensation in your tent. This isn't really a huge problem until it's freezing out and the condensation has the whole side of your tent frozen stiff and you're trying to pack it away the next day, which I have run into before. Still a great option for heating your tent, and if you don't want to deal with the diesel heater, this is really great. I have both the larger Mr. Heater and the smaller one, and I prefer the larger one just due to stability. The smaller one is cheaper and works best on a flat, stable surface, whereas the larger one is a little bit more money but has a much more substantial base. The last one in the heating category that I'm going to mention is just a 12-volt heated blanket. This one is really great because even if it breaks somehow, you can still use it as a regular blanket. Normal heated blankets take up a decent amount of power, so if you only have a small power bank or something, the 12 volt is actually a really great way to go. Alright guys, so there's some stuff out here that I didn't really fit in any of these categories, so I will go ahead and make a list and put that below. But if you guys like this video, maybe you should check this one out. Or you can check out this one. Or you can subscribe right here.